Hey everyone, and welcome to the Emotionally Intelligent Parenting Podcast. Today I'm actually responding to a message that I got from a parent who asked about how do I get my child to listen when I have told them the same thing 1,000 times, and this actually relates to safety. So a big thing that they think obviously is really important, life or death situation, their child isn't listening, isn't following instructions. What do we do? So I have, with permission, got that message, and I'm going to respond and give some tips, some advice, some strategies, and some things to reflect on. I think it's going to be really helpful for you guys, even if you don't have young kids. This child's pretty young, but it goes for all ages when we think about how to respond with emotional intelligence, or why sometimes our kids don't listen or aren't cooperative. Anyway, it's going to be really great, but as usual, before I begin, I do want to acknowledge the Darug Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I record this podcast, where I work and where I live as well. I want to pay my respects to the First Nations people, their elders and ancestors, and I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and I stand in solidarity towards a shared future. Okay, I think this is going to be a good one, guys. Let's jump straight into it. So this message came through from Ray on one of my social media platforms, and she has said, what are your best tips on responding to a child who is not listening to road rules again and again? I've had to tell our 3.5-year-old 1,000 times not to ride on the road. Of course, I fear the worst will happen one day, and so I end up yelling and getting so mad. He obviously doesn't understand the severity of just riding onto the road and what can happen. I want to deal with it appropriately so he is safe and so I don't keep losing my cool. So I get a ton of messages through Instagram, through Facebook, and things like that. And I wish I can respond to all of them. And sometimes I do. But I thought I would pick out this one today because it's a really good one. It's a really interesting one to have a think about. And I think it probably shows up in lots of different families' homes, even if your child isn't 3.5. Even if it's not about listening to road rules, and even if it's not like they are riding on the road. So I'm guessing that this child is riding on like a bike or a trike or something like that onto the road near their home. That's just kind of the assumption I'm going to make. And she says that she's told him 1,000 times, which, oh my gosh, like how many of us have told our kids something many, many times only for them to just do that exact same thing that we've told them not to, or that they got in trouble for like yesterday. Anyway, so I just want to kind of put out there as a disclaimer, this is so common. And I almost feel like it's a trap for parents that we're missing a lot of things that are kind of what's going on beneath the surface or beyond what we can see. And that leads us to get so mad and so triggered. And we're like, you are doing this on purpose. Like, I'm going to take that bike away. There it goes in the bin or in the garage. You know what I mean? So, okay, so a few things I want to say kind of off the get-go. This, I think, and similar situations to this, actually reflects more on the child's ability to follow the instructions. And some might kind of phrase that in like a way of the child being compliant or obedient. You guys probably know, if you have listened to this podcast before or seen some of my posts on social media, I really don't like the ideology that a lot of parents have around, if your child is compliant and obedient, then they are good kids. And that's like the goal, right? To get your kids to obey and be compliant. Anyway, putting that aside, I think this relates more to my child isn't following the instructions, they're not doing what I ask, rather than they're not listening. And I know that sounds like I'm splitting hairs, and maybe I am, but just stick with me, because it's not so much about listening as in the actual, the skill of listening, the cognitive skill, I should say, of listening, because the child is probably able to, well, I'm assuming again, that the child can listen and can hear what the parent is saying, but is then not following the instruction. They're not kind of following through with that request, which is like, don't ride on the road, or ride on the grass, or stay inside the gate, or whatever it is. Kind of sounds like splitting hairs, but what I think can be really helpful is if we focus on, okay, the child isn't following the instructions, why? Like, what's getting in the way of that? If we're just running on autopilot, then we're probably thinking, this kid isn't listening, they're being so rude, they're being disrespectful, don't they know how serious this is? And they're doing it on purpose kind of thing. Let's think about, why might they not be following this instruction? Like, off the get-go, I go, okay, this child's 3.5. So really, really young, right? Kids that age, and actually even beyond that, 5, 6, 7, 8 kind of thing, they don't have the foresight, so the ability to like pull themselves out of the here and the now and to kind of fast forward and think, what would happen if I do this and do that? And if I do this, then that would happen. But if I do that, then this would happen. Like kind of putting themselves in the future, right? And estimating what the outcome of their choices is going to be. So they don't have the foresight and they don't have the life experience to make safe decisions like where to ride. So that's on us, basically. This child doesn't have the ability to think forward and the life experience of maybe seeing people get hit by cars or seeing car crashes, or just the ability to kind of conceptualize a giant, how many ton object and how small they are and like what would happen, like what would logically happen. Do you know what I mean? So I think you guys get the point there. That difficulty with foresight, with life experience. The other thing I want to mention is the impulse control of kids, especially like toddlers and preschool age kids. It's like zero. It's almost zero, right? Especially in fun, playful, like exciting moments, that impulse control goes out the window. So the ability for them to control their behavior when they are, engaged in an activity, that's really hard for them. They're actually cognitively not wired to have that skill yet, to go, oh, I want to ride over there, or there's a bird or a dog, or look at that big flat, like that big expanse of smooth road, like surface. I want to ride on that, So the impulse control, the foresight, things like that, the ability to make good, safe decisions, that's really, really, really reduced. It's, we talk about the brain being under construction at that age. That's what's happening. So I think sometimes it's really helpful for us as parents to go, when I'm really triggered in this situation and like it's happening again and again, and I'm so mad, like, why won't you XYZ, or why do you keep XYZ? Then we have to think, what is getting in the child's way of them not doing that thing, or doing that thing they need to be doing, like getting in the bath or getting in the car or homework, whatever it is. What's getting in the way? There are a few of the cognitive skills that I wanted to touch on. I think that does help close what we call the expectation gap, because when we have this gap in what our child is doing and what we expect them to be able to do, oh man, we think they're pushing our buttons. We think they're putting it on. They're doing it intentionally and like just to get a rise out of us, or just to see what we would do. I'm like, disclaimer, there are times when our kids will, like, they'll do something, they'll turn around and look at us and be like, huh? Like, what's going to happen? Like, even that, it's that normal, natural, developmentally appropriate testing behavior. Anyway, putting that aside. So, like with something like toilet training, right? You can tell your child over and over again, pee in the potty, or do a poo in the toilet, or, like use your pull-ups or put undies on or whatever. Like, you could tell them over and over and again, but they're not going to be able to do that thing, like follow the instruction or complete the task, until they're developmentally ready. Then they will get it. Until then, they're practicing, they're like falling off the wagon, or they're coming off track, like they'll make mistakes, they'll mess up. That's up to us to go, whoops, let me help you with that. Like, whoops, let me hold the boundary here. Let me show you what to do. Do you know what I mean? We have to remind them, we have to help them out, we have to coach them, we have to guide them, we have to support them, because they're still learning how to do that thing. Same with toilet training, same with eating, same with reading, same with riding a bike, same with riding, like this child not riding on the road, like where is a safe place to ride? So basically, until that point that they have the cognitive capacity that's like wired in, until that point, you are managing the situation and your child. As in, you're kind of being their frontal lobe. So what does it mean to be their frontal lobe? Basically, that means you have to do the skills, or show them the skills that they don't yet have in that particular situation. You have to plan out and organize where can they ride? Can they ride out the front? Does it have to be out the back only? Does the gate have to be locked? Do you need to be like sitting kind of on the driveway? I'm not sure of the layout, but you know what I mean? So that you're like, okay, if you come too close, I'm going to catch you. We have to be their frontal lobe, because they don't yet have a fully developed one, and they're going to stuff up and make mistakes, and some of these mistakes are life or death. So we can't just be like, well, I've told you 3 times, so, oh well, on your head if you don't do it. So that means, as I mentioned, planning and organizing, so the space in the task or the activity and how to make it safe. It's also attention and focus are some other executive function skills in the frontal lobe that are still highly under construction. So the child cannot pay attention to where they're riding, that the road is dangerous, what you're saying, or what even their thoughts, what they're thinking and what they're thinking about. Like all of this stuff is a bit of like a melting pot or like a soup in their head. They don't have that ability that we kind of do to, how as parents, I think we always have like one eye on the road, or we always have one eye on the stove, or, or on the time. Like that ability to shift focus and attention, they don't have that, especially at 3.5. I talked a little bit earlier about foresight and kind of the ability to make safe decisions based on that. I still think even for really young kids, like 3.5, maybe this is the speech pathologist still in me coming out, but I still think it's really valuable to communicate that to your child, even if you're not sure if they're really fully understanding it. But get into the habit of clearly and like consciously communicating with your kids about why they can't do something, why they do need to do something, why it's healthy, why it's safe, why we don't, why it's respectful, like all of those things. I'm like, why don't we just from the get-go talk to our kids about what they need to do and what we're doing, so that they start to understand really early on, so that we have to make sure we have good reasons for why we're asking them to do something or not do something. We can't just have these like arbitrary, because I said so, or like, because you've had enough. Like we're still allowed to have those boundaries, but I think we need to know why, so we can communicate that and then like pass it on like the baton, pass it on to our kids, so that they then start to use that and make good decisions themselves as they grow older. So I'd still say to this parent, explain to your child why he can't ride on the road. I know you probably have already done that, but do that. If you're allowing him to still ride, let's say out the front near the road, explain that to him. I would place yourself somewhere near the road, or I would lock the fence, if the gate or the fence, if there is one. If not, I would say, let's ride out the back, and this is why. Maybe we can make a ramp, to make it more enticing if they think, no, I want to ride out the front. So, or maybe you can take, maybe around the corner, you've got an empty car park that you can take him to if he wants that like big, expanse of smooth road. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But I guess one of my main points is we have to be our child's frontal lobe, because they don't yet have one. We can't just say, well, you know what, you're going to find out the hard way. In some situations we can do that if it's safe, but not when kids are like swinging on a tree branch, or something low that's maybe they'll just fall off with a little thud, not one where they're going to get really injured or really hurt or injure someone else. So the last thing I want to touch on is that the mum Ray had said, of course I fear the worst will happen one day, so I end up yelling and getting so mad, and also how do I deal with it appropriately so I don't keep losing my cool. So I totally get that this is so frustrating, because there's that risk of like, my child could get really, really injured or worse, and also they're not listening to me. So this element of like, I'm getting triggered kind of comes up to me. So when we are really frustrated or triggered with something, I have a few questions that we can kind of reflect on or ask ourselves. And it can kind of help us to problem solve a situation, notice how we're feeling and what we need, and then how to move through it so that we kind of get to the other side productively and also durably, so that we're not just coming up against this problem again and again and again and again. Okay, so first question is my expectation here realistic? So is it realistic for us to rely on a 3.5-year-old to listen once or twice, or, and understand then that they're not allowed to ride out onto the road? I'm not saying that this parent was doing that, but is this a realistic expectation? Not just age-wise, but also think of your child's developmental level. Sometimes, especially if we have maybe neurodivergent kids, we need to consider maybe their age is 10, but developmentally or cognitively, where are they at? So that can be a difference. Second question is a boundary that I have being crossed? Because that can really help us to understand, no wonder I'm having a big reaction to this. This is something really important to me. So notice if you think, yes, this person, my husband, my wife, my neighbor, my colleague, my child, they're crossing a boundary here. What is that boundary? Like, why do I have that? Why is this so important to me? Third question is there a need that isn't being met here with me? Do I feel like I need to be heard? Do I feel like I need more one-on-one time with you? Do I feel like I need to nurture myself or do some self-care here and I haven't? Like, am I burning out? Or like, these are not just for this situation, obviously. These are just generally ask yourself, is there a need that isn't being met? Fourth one is, what do I need to do for myself and for this situation? It's kind of like a two-parter there. What do I need to do for myself, right? And what do I need to do in this situation? There's some problem solving. I think that, like, I've got lots of different ideas. I kind of mentioned some of them before about riding on the road and out the front. Like, I don't know what their home looks like. If I was coaching this family one-on-one, I'd be like, go outside and take a photo of your front. Show me if there's gate. Show me if there's grass. Show me where he's riding. Show me what kind of bike he's got. Like, what's your back look like? Where do you live? Is there somewhere else, that you go, yada, 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 right? Fifth question is, how can I respond in a way that honors myself and yet it's still respectful to the other person? Do I need to think about this and reflect on it before I respond or before I make a decision? So if we think, oh my gosh, I'm getting like I'm letting a 3.5-year-old with this fun, innocent activity really get to me, why is that? I need to reflect on that because he's not meaning to push my buttons. He's just being his little 3.5-year-old self. I'm just guessing here, right? Just suggestions. And then sixth one, and this is the last one because I know these are long, what can I do to regulate myself right now? So if we're dysregulated, if we're getting stressed, anxious, afraid, really angry, like, what can you do to regulate yourself? Because you guys know when emotions are on high, logic and language are low. So our ability to access logic, make good decisions, and use language or communicate in a way that really is beneficial, then that stuff goes out the window. Like, bye! And you just use this explosive knee-jerk reaction. You're like, damn it, why did I feel so bad. He's only 3.5. So I may or may not have been there. So what can I do to regulate myself right now? Sometimes it might mean I need to remove myself from the situation. Sometimes it means I need to have some quiet. Like, just take me out of the situation. I need some quiet. I need a cuppa. I need, a book, or I just want to sit on my own, or I want to go in the bathroom and just sit. Do I want to reflect? Do I want to have some self-care? Do I want to vent? Like, is venting, sometimes healthy venting does help ourselves to regulate, right? We can't bottle it in and hold it up. We need that release, I think, sometimes. And then do I want to think of my options? Like, what can I do in this situation? Do I need an extra pair of eyes, like a fresh brain on this situation? So I know those questions were a lot, but I think maybe even if you haven't been in the exact same situation as this parent, I think it's really helpful to think about, okay, what is going on that is triggering me or stressing me? What behavior from my kids? Maybe it is not listening. Maybe it is that they are arguing all the time and they're siblings. Maybe it's that homework is like the bane of our existence. Maybe it's dinner time, mealtime, bedtime, who knows? You can ask yourself those questions. You can rewind on this and listen again. And I think kind of a couple of those points that I made at the start, like, is this really about listening, or is it really about the child's ability to follow instructions and remember and recall what you have said and what you've asked them or told them not to do? I think impulse control, that's it's one of the biggest, what we call lagging skills in kids, is that ability to want to do something or go somewhere or have something or eat something or take something, and to be able to control that and modulate it or pause on it and hold it so that we don't just do the thing, say the thing, right? So that is really, really hard. I think closing that expectation gap between what we think our child should be able to do and what they are doing, I think that is massive. I swear that was like a turning point in me and my husband's parenting when we learned about that concept. I was like, oh, there's a name for it. So be your child's frontal lobe is something I also remember I talked about, and I don't know where I heard that. I'm sure lots of different people say it. I follow and read a lot of kind of neuroscience and child literature, child development literature, and I love that concept that if we can't yet rely on our child's brain to make good decisions, then we have to be that part of their brain, and that's the frontal lobe. That's where all that executive function is. That's where they make good decisions. They problem solve. They have empathy. They have emotional regulation. Like, it's a minefield, right? And we know that the brain is not fully developed until the mid to late 20s. So like, brain explosion. Oh my gosh, that is so far away. My kids are 7 and almost 10. And I'm like, no wonder. Like, no wonder we have those moments. Like now, I am so much less triggered than I used to be with my kids before I understood this stuff. Like before emotional intelligence. I was like, why are they doing that? Are you serious? Like, come on. I only told you that. Like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? Like we had all those moments and more. And now, I'm not saying that we're perfect. Like, please don't think we're robots. But now I'm like, yep, saw that coming. Like, no wonder that happened. Like, makes sense. It just really, really helps me to understand why they behave the way they do, why they have such big emotions, and then I know what I can do about it and how I can help them. Okay, I hope that episode was helpful, guys. I really enjoyed answering that question and kind of pulling a few thoughts out and putting them out there. Please send me your questions if you have them. I would love to hear from you. You can either send us an email at hello@stephaniepinto.com, or you can find me on one of the platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and just send your message there and say, hey, can you answer this on the podcast? And who knows, I probably, maybe I won't get that many at all, and I'll be like, oh my God, I finally have one. So please send them through, and let me know if you want to be anonymous or not, and give me as much information as you want, because then it helps me to kind of get a bit of a picture and be able to answer it. Don't know if you guys just heard that knocking. I have a little person at the door, so I'm going to wrap it up. Have a great rest of the week, and I will see you guys next time for the next episode.